All right, I think we can go ahead and kick it off. It's 3:45, so good afternoon and welcome everyone. Really excited to be here for the fourth session of Success at ASU Spring 2021 Conference. This session is a co-hosted session. We're going to be talking about navigating different types of work authorization, including CPT and OPT. And we're going to kind of present this from two different perspectives. So we've got two speakers today. We've got one person from International Students and Scholars Center who can really talk about, applying for CPT and OPT, eligibility, things like that. And then I am from Career and Professional Development Services. So we can kind of transition to then talking about when you're looking for a job or internship on CPT or OPT, how to kind of go about that process and navigate work authorization from that career perspective. So kind of bringing it both together into one presentation for you, which we hope will be helpful. So I'll go ahead and introduce us, and I'll go ahead and start with myself. I'm Brianne Lott. I'm a Global Career Initiatives Coordinator. Like I said, I work at Career and Professional Development Services. And I mostly work with international students on career readiness, which is preparing for jobs and internships, different professional development opportunities. So really excited to be here. And then also with us is Laura. Laura, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself real quick.
Sure, Brian. This is Laura Schuler. I'm a manager over at the International Students and Scholars Center, and I oversee the folks that process the applications for work authorizations for international students on an F1 visa. And I'm really happy to be here today.
Awesome, thank you. And if everyone else would like to introduce yourselves in the chat, that would be wonderful too. Maybe just a little bit of information about yourself, like your name, your home country, and then I tried to include one fun fact. Of course, being a career professional, my fun fact is about work. So wondering, what was your very first job? So feel free to go ahead and share in the chat as we get started. So here's an agenda of what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start off talking about different types of work authorization options that exist for you. Next, we're going to talk about hiring international students, and as a student, how you can target international friendly employers. We're also going to talk about some of the strategy around approaching this topic of work authorization during your job search. So how can you have conversations about your work authorization? And we'll leave some time at the end for question and answer. So feel free throughout the presentation to submit any questions that you have in the chat. Laura and I will definitely try to keep an eye on the chat to answer those questions as we go, but we'll also have some time at the end for questions as well. All right, so we're just going to start off by defining what work authorization is, and I'm just going to hand it over to Laura for the next part of the presentation.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're going to talk about work authorizations, what they are, how you get them, and why they're needed. So basically, when you're on an F1 visa, your primary focus here is to, of course, obtain your degree and to study. If you would like a job on campus, your F1 visa will allow you to get a job on campus without further authorization. However, if you're looking to work off campus, this is when you have to determine what type of authorization you'll need. Let's continue to the next slide, please. Oh, goodness. Okay.
This was the slide that I put in there. Sorry if it's like in a random spot. Basically, we just wanted to say, there's the two pieces of getting the authorization, which definitely you'll work with ISSC to understand that, and then getting the job or internship, which you'll work with Career and Professional Development Services. So, all right.
Thank you so much. And that leads us into, well, what does ISSC do versus what does CPDS do? So Some of the things that you'll use ISSC for is questions about your eligibility for work authorization. How do you obtain those work authorizations? Maybe how would you maintain your status while you're working? And questions about your interactions with SEVP and the SEVP portal. Brianne, you want to tell them a little bit about what CPDS would answer?
Yeah, definitely. So we can help you with finding the actual jobs and internships that you'll use to fulfill your requirements for CPT and OPT. So we work closely together with ISSC and kind of navigate students back and forth between the two. And we can also answer questions about developing a job search strategy that's going to be best for your type of work authorization, helping you to navigate questions about your work authorization, whether that's during the job application process or preparing for interviews, and then also how to kind of confidently speak about your work authorization.
Okay, well, there is one type of authorization you get to work off campus, and that's called practical training. But within the practical training, there is curricular, and that's mainly used for an internship. You do have to be enrolled in a course and receive credits. It has to be a part of your program. So it can be either required of everyone in that degree, or it can be there as an optional track to your degree. And then there's optional practical training, and that is 12 months of work authorization that you can use either during or after your program, or a little bit of both. And then if you are in a STEM field, it can continue on for another 24 months for a total of 3 years. So let's talk a little bit about CPT. CPT is going to require that you have been a student in full-time status for one academic year prior to being eligible for CPT. So that's one of the first things. An academic year means 2 semesters, a fall and a spring, or a spring and a fall. There are exceptions at times. However, they're not often or frequent. So if you have a certain situation, you can absolutely contact the ISSC and we can see if accommodations can be met. This authorization is given for 1 semester at a time. So you would have to apply each semester if you had a continuing internship. And if you were to use 12 months of full-time curricular practical training, that would negate your ability to apply for or qualify for optional practical training. A lot of students get concerned. This is full-time CPT only. If you are authorized for a part-time curricular practical training, it does not count against your optional practical training eligibility. So we'll move into optional practical training, which is an authorization that'll allow you to work off campus. Of course, it has to be directly related to your field of study. It can be used prior, that's considered pre-completion OPT or pre-OPT, and after, which is post-OPT or post-completion optional practical training, to be used after graduation. As we mentioned earlier, folks that are earning a STEM degree are eligible to apply for an additional 24-month period of work authorization. And the processing time for these applications is rather long. It has been delayed due to the COVID pandemic, so it'll take between 90 to 120 days to receive approval from USCIS. What this means is you need to apply early if you have plans for optional practical training. So a little bit about post-OPT. You can't start work until you have the EAD, which is the Employment Authorization document that has been issued by USCIS. So post OPT is to be used after you graduate. The really cool thing to remember is while you're on OPT, full-time is considered 20 hours or more per week. So if you have a job that you're working 20 hours a week, you're considered full-time and you're maintaining your status. You can, of course, work any number of hours above that, but the minimum is 20 hours a week. Acceptable types of employment while on post OPT are volunteering. You can do paid or unpaid internships. You can have part-time jobs that are less than 20 hours a week. You could have 2 10-hour-week jobs that equal 20 and you're still maintaining status. You can work full-time, and of course you can work multiple jobs. However, if you've used 12 months of pre-completion optional practical training or 12 months of full-time curricular practical training, you will not be eligible to apply for post-OPT. And for the 24-month STEM extension, because it takes a while to get these authorizations, USCIS will allow you to work for up to 180 days after your post-optional practical training ends while your application is being adjudicated. The qualifier is you must have filed a timely application. So USCIS will need to receive that application before your post-OPT has ended. On STEM, you must be working full-time. Again, that's 20 hours or more per week. But it's a little bit more strict. This is a training plan. It's still training. I know it's a job, but it's still training as an optional practical training. So there are higher qualifications for this additional 2 years. You must work for a company that is E-Verified. And the E-Verify system is a system that the employer can put your name into, and it will come back and tell you, yes, that you're authorized and you are eligible to work in the United States. Also, while on STEM, you are not allowed to work in a volunteer or an unpaid position. Your position must pay you what the marketable rate is. You cannot work for yourself, as you have to have a sponsoring supervisor, somebody who is overlooking your training, and you cannot work part-time jobs while on STEM. I often get asked, can I have 2 jobs on STEM? And the answer is yes, but that's a lot of work. Even though full-time is 20 hours or more, most US positions are 40 hours a week. So if you're working 2, you're going to be at least working 60 hours, if not 80 or more. And it can be difficult to keep your head above water there. All of the information that you would ever want to know about post-OPT, pre-OPT, CPT, and the STEM extension can be found on the ISSC's website. We just got a makeover of the website here. So if you're not familiar with the new design, I'm giving you a little screenshot. If you hover over the student menu item, you'll see employment. We talk about employment authorizations. That first page there is where we're going to put any notifications, any new guidance from USCIS or SEVIS that may influence your applications or your ability to work off campus. We also talk about any type of on-campus employment here. We talk about your F1 opportunities during your academic program, which is your pre-OPT and your CPT. We also have a page that talks just about those F1 off-campus employment authorizations for after you graduate, and that would include your post-OPT and your STEM extension. We will also have a link there that has employment opportunities, and this is directly related with career and professional development services, and it's where you can go to find jobs that may be available for you in your field of study. Also, we talk a little bit about the pitfalls of volunteering and internships. We talk about how volunteering and unpaid internships fall within our federal Department of Labor, and that if you are volunteering, it's probably good to find a work authorization to protect you while you're in the US. And then again, we'll talk to you about how to obtain a Social Security number under our employment area. I'm going to go back to Brianne now, and she can talk to you about why most of you are here. How do I find that job? And how do I know if they'll hire me on OPT or CPT? So, Brianne, it's all yours.
All right, thanks, Laura. So next we're going to talk about how to identify, sometimes I call them international friendly employers, but this just really means how do you find out which companies have positions that are available to you as an international student or alumni. So we have a couple of different tools at ASU that I like to recommend to all students to definitely check out. So the first one that I'm going to share is called Interstride. So we've got the website there in the bottom right corner. It's just interstride.com. So if you have not checked out this resource before, it's really, really cool. I encourage everyone to log on, spend some time playing around. This is a platform that was created by international students for other international students studying in the US. And so there are lots of really good career resources on here. And you can kind of see at the top of the screen here some of the different functions that exist within Interstride. So what you're seeing on my screen is the Visa Insights section. So this includes historical data about companies and employers that have previously hired international applicants on different types of visas. So it's a really powerful tool. You can go in here and you can use these filters over on the left-hand side to select different types of work authorizations, different industries, years. You can even look at specific cities where you might be interested in working. And then this database of historical information will show you who are the top employers on OPT, who are the top employers for H-1B. And then this information is powerful because you can use this to see if those same companies have opportunities available for you, obviously depending on what your major is, what your field is that you're going into. But we know that companies that have previously hired international applicants, they're familiar with the process. They know what's required of them. They know what's required of the student. They feel really comfortable with the process and everything. So those tend to be really good companies to research first in your job search. And what you can do with this data, if you see any companies here that look interesting to you, you think they might be a good fit, I would suggest heading over to that company's website. So you could just Google their name and go to their career page to see what kinds of opportunities they currently have posted. When you're actually in Interstride, in addition to seeing this raw number of individuals that they hired, you're also able to click on each of these companies for a more detailed look at what are the types of positions that they hired for, what were the average salaries that they were paying. So really, I think this is a great way to do some of that background research to think about where you might have some good opportunities available to you too. Another tool that exists is on Handshake. So you guys definitely know if you've ever attended any career sessions before, we talk about Handshake all the time because this is the #1 place where we at ASU are posting jobs and internships for all of our ASU students and alumni. So just like InterStride, you get access to Handshake using your ASU username and password. And once you're in here looking for job opportunities, I wanted to highlight this filter that we have called our work authorization filter. So luckily you can check one of these two boxes. So for example, if you are on OPT and you're looking for a job that's going to hire you on OPT, you just check that little box and it's going to filter out all of the results so that only the relevant ones are showing for you. So I actually just did a check a little bit earlier this week. We currently have about 10,000 jobs and internships posted on Handshake, and about 2,500 of those are willing to accept OPT or CPT. So it definitely helps you to kind of be targeted in your approach by making sure that you use that work authorization filter. All right, so those are some of the tools that exist to help you to find the positions that align with your type of work authorization. Another common question that I get from students is around talking about their work authorization and how to have those kinds of conversations with employers. So how should you be disclosing that information during the job application? Do you need to include it on your application documents? Is that something that's going to come up in an interview? So I just wanted to kind of pose a question here. I would love if you would participate in the chat. Do you have any interview experience in the US so far? And if so, did anybody ask you about your work authorization or your legal right to work in the US during your interview process? We'll give us just a minute to respond in the chat. All right, so it looks like someone is saying yes, but they did not ask during the interview because they already knew. So that's a great point. Most questions will ask outright during the actual application submission process. So usually there's a very clear question that asks about your work authorization. Ramon says, yes, I was interviewed by Starbucks at ASU and I had to notify them that I was an international student. So that's actually a really good example because Starbucks at ASU is actually an on-campus job opportunity. So they are pretty familiar, I think, with working with international students. Oh, okay, I see. It looks like actually the first person said actually they didn't get hired once they knew about your work authorization status. Sorry to hear that. That can be really frustrating. So I think that again goes to show like the importance of being upfront and clear about your work authorization, and also specifically targeting positions, applying to positions that you know upfront accept your type of work authorization. That can definitely be really heartbreaking when you make it through an interview and get to like the final stages and then, you know, they're not able to hire you. All right, well, thanks everyone for sharing your experience. So next I have a video, and actually I have to make sure that my sound is shared with you. All right, so I've got a little video here for us.
If you are an international student studying in the US on an F1 or J1 visa and are interested in working in the United States, either during your program of study or after you graduate, you should be prepared to confidently have conversations with potential employers about your work authorization status. International students are admitted to the US as non-immigrants and have some restriction to the types of employments you can engage in during your stay. The most common student visa type, the F1 visa, allows students to work on campus up to 20 hours per week during the academic school year. If you want to pursue a job or internship off campus, you'll need special approval called work authorization. You can determine your eligibility for curricular practical training, CPT, optional practical training, OPT, or other work benefit opportunities on the International Students and Scholars Center website. Connect with ISSC if you have any questions about the best option for you. Once you have applied for and been granted work authorization, you will receive official documentation such as an Employment Authorization (EAD) card. This document proves that the U.S. government has granted you work authorization approval. You can share a copy of the document with your new employer during the hiring process to verify that you are approved to work in the U.S. In addition, you may find that employers have questions about your work authorization status either during the interview or hiring process. It is your responsibility to understand the regulations for your type of work authorization and to be able to communicate these clearly to your employer. Employers may ask you things like, are there any restrictions to your employment based on your work authorization? Or, is anything required from me as your employer, such as filing for a petition on your behalf or paying any processing fees? If you are not knowledgeable or seem unsure when answering these questions, an employer may be hesitant to hire you. Some employers may perceive hiring an international student to be more difficult than hiring a domestic worker. They may even hold misconceptions or false beliefs about how easy or difficult it is to hire an international student. If you are able to speak up with factually correct information, you are going to be your own best advocate. You've already proven to your employer that you will be a valuable addition to the team. Don't let miscommunication about work authorization stand in your way. So how should you prepare to successfully navigate these conversations with employers? Here are some top tips. Know the rules and regulations about your work authorization. What is it called? How long has work authorization been granted to you? When can your employment start and when will it end? Anticipate the types of questions that employers might have. Is any paperwork required? Is this the same thing as sponsoring an international student? What happens when your work authorization expires? And practice answering those questions. Some other tips are: be honest, direct, concise, and confident. Avoid providing too much detail. Keep the focus of the interaction on you and your qualifications, not your visa status. And you do not have to bring up the topic of timing if the employer doesn't. Always address the question if asked. Try to make sure you've had a chance to impress the employer first. To help you prepare for these difficult discussions, ASU's Career and Professional Development Services has created pre-recorded work authorization questions that you can practice responding to using our interview stream platform. From the CPDS website, navigate to the Career Resources tab and then scroll down to the interviewing section. You can use your ASU Right password to log in to Interview Stream. Click on Conduct an Interview to get started. We've compiled key questions for you, so click on Created for Me and then scroll through our practice interview sets until you see one titled International Students Work Authorization. By clicking Start this interview, you can record yourself responding to the pre-recorded questions. Once you finish recording your practice interview, you can watch your recording to critique yourself, share with others for another perspective, or submit it to CPDS for personalized professional feedback on how you did and areas for improvement. You can also schedule a one-on-one appointment with a career and industry specialist to continue the conversation about interviewing, interacting with employers, and preparing to land your dream job or internship. If you find that your employer has additional questions or is still hesitant after your conversation, we have developed an employer guide to hiring international students, which we would be happy to share with your employer directly. To request a copy, email brianne.lott@asu.edu. If you are
All right. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate some of those resources that we have available for you. So the interview stream is a really good one that you can access anytime on your own. So you would just access that like it showed through the Career Services website. I'm going to go ahead and put the link to that in the chat for everyone. It's just career.asu.edu. And once you get logged on to Interview Stream, you'll be able to choose those practice questions where you can just practice answering some of these common questions that you might get from employers, and you'll record yourself. You're able to watch it back. And I feel like that's really helpful for just kind of getting comfortable with your responses and being prepared in case those questions do come up. And if you have any additional questions, you can always meet with Career Services. So we would be happy to help kind of like guide you through that as well. Yeah, so I think that's it. I will go ahead and open it up for questions. We've got a couple of minutes, so any questions for Laura or myself? We'll take a look at the chat. Feel free to type in any questions you have. Yes, so in the last part of the video, we did mention a resource called an employer guide to hiring international students. And I know that this is something that actually exists within the different career centers at ASU as well. So depending on what school you're a part of, if you're a W.P. Carey student or a Fulton student, they have their own versions of an employer guide. I have a copy of the employer guide for anyone who's not in one of those schools, so any other ASU student. And basically what that resource is if we come across any employers who have some questions or maybe misconceptions about what's required of them to hire an international student, we would be happy to share that resource with the employer directly. So you can just connect us with the employer to make that happen. And one other question about if the recording of this session will be available on the ISSC page. And I don't know exactly where it's going to be posted. Laura, I don't know if you know, I'm imagining maybe just on like ISSC YouTube channel.
Yes, once they're ready. It takes about 2 weeks because we have to do the closed captioning, but it will go on our YouTube channel.
Perfect. And then one question for you, Laura. Yeah.
Yeah, how come STEM fields can have longer OPTs compared to other fields? The reasoning behind the STEM extension is a lot of, it's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And a lot of the employers who would hire international students would want to put them on 2-year projects or 3-year projects and couldn't hire them because their authorization would end in 12 months. So that's how it came about, and that's why the STEM fields get a little bit longer. Otherwise, those students who are on OPT without a STEM field, if their employers would like to hire them, there are other avenues such as the H-1B. And if you'll go to our website, the ISSC's website, under events, you can find a list of all of our webinars for this semester, and some of them will cover a little bit more of work authorizations.
And one person was just asking about answers to the questions provided in the slides. So there aren't necessarily like correct answers to some of those questions that were posed. If you want to further discuss, what would be some good answers, I would be happy to meet with students and have that discussion. So I went ahead and put my email into the chat as well so we can connect further. One question, the video said that we don't have to discuss timing unless an employer asks. So no, what that means is like, it doesn't mean that you don't tell them that you're only allowed to work for a year. So if your work authorization only allows you to work for 1 year, that's really important information that you would want to share with the employer up front. The employer may already know that based on the type of work authorization that you have, particularly if they're experienced hiring individuals on that work authorization. But yeah, that information should always be disclosed. All right, any final words, Laura, as we wrap up?
No, I'd just like to reiterate, if you all have questions, please feel free to contact the ISSC or contact Career Services. We do work together, so if there is an overlap, we're happy to combine forces and meet with you at the same time. Just let us know. That's what we're here for. Thank you all for attending.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks everyone. We hope you have a great rest of your day. The next little bit of success at ASU is going to be a cultural sharing event to kind of wrap us up for the day. So hope to see you there for cultural sharing. And thanks for attending.